Hey people, it's been a long time. So, what am I going to talk about today? Today, I want to talk about two aspects of the great work. Because there's two pillars to the temple. Sometimes you see that, in Freemason lodges, there's a black and white pillar. You see this in the second tarot card, the priestess. She's between two pillars. And this idea, Kabbalah, there's the three pillars, the center pillar, but that's just the pillar of equilibrium. There are two extremes that also must be realized and reconciled. That's the whole thing about the two pillars of the temple is when you walk between the two pillars, you become the third pillar. The third pillar is man, or the initiate, or the adept trying to get through and get initiations or whatever. But what are these two pillars? Many people have described them in different ways. That, one's black, one's white, Jachin, Boaz. So the pillars are life and death, so to speak. So one pillar is the pillar of the mystery of death, and one pillar is the mystery of life, giving life to something, creating life, or creating something living inside you, and the other thing is dying. We can kind of understand dying more. It's like, you need to die to who you were to become who you need to be. The boy needs to die so the man can be born. A caterpillar dies so that the butterfly can be born. Death is seen as a transformation in this context. But then, so the idea is there's two things. There's a stripping down and a building up on the other side. These are the two poles of the work. And there's always these two things, masculine and feminine, imagination and willpower, or consciousness and willpower, or something like that. There's always these two modes. And it's very interesting because I've come across two other ways of expressing this, and that's using sciencey kind of terms. One is radiation, and the other is crystallization. So what do I mean by these terms? These are fundamentally two parts of the great work. You can do one without the other. Most people do neither, or you can do both. But if you do both, which one do you do first? So before I extrapolate that, what are they? Well, crystallization is the birth. Crystallization is creating something. Our physical body is this material, and it is like a soil, and out of this soil something can grow. A flower, a lotus, a rose, if you want to be more Western about it. But something needs to grow out of it. We need to make something of ourselves. In the Gurdjieffian system, the fourth way teachings, they talk about this as crystallization. So the idea is imagine that there's a type of material that's invisible, that is unknown to science. Think of the idea that there's many materials that are unknown to science. And that when you breathe in, say you breathe in 20 particles that are unknown to science. But when you breathe out, 15 of these particles come out. So when you breathe in, only 5 types of particles stay within you. Someone who does pranayama or breathing exercises, then someone who breathes consciously, when they breathe out, only 10 escape. So they've actually doubled the amount of particles, doubled the amount of energy that they've captured within themselves. And a master, say when he breathes, he gains 15 particles of what was really there in the air. And someone else, perhaps, the greatest of the great, could extract all 20 pieces, but nonetheless, they're, the pure breath. But this is this idea that there's this ambient energy all around us. And these methods, prayers and meditations and ritual magic, all of this, in a sense, is a way of binding this energy to us. We want to saturate. Our body is like a vessel, and it's kind of filled with water, and we want to saturate our internal energies with this. We want to saturate the flask that we are with all of these energies. So the crystallization, for those who don't know, you get a glass of water, put some salt crystals. You can do it with sugar. Not crystals. You get the powder. You get the powdered salt or powdered crystals, whatever. You put it in until it fully saturates in the water, and then you stir it about, give it a boil. You can go for super saturation, or you can let it cool, and sometimes crystals form. This process, which I've just kind of gone through very quickly, and not a correct way at all, but nonetheless, this process is crystallization. We're trying to do that in our bodies with the application of, we're trying to gain energy through our practices, and then with the application of a type of fire, special type of fire, we're trying to create something that's separate from us, but at the same time, we've created it, and our consciousness can go in it and pilot it. Therefore, it can survive the ray of death. It can leave this body. It can go to other planets, other galaxies. It can other dimensions, other times, other spaces. With this, we become a different type of human. That's the path of crystallization. Perhaps if we can grow it even, we can add other certain attributes onto it, which were impossible when we were human. So this is the realm of the gods. This is something else. This is the human becoming god-like. But now there's this other thing to do, which is called radiation or radiance. And in this path, it's about connecting to something higher. So deep inside us, we have a being, which is really a fragment of God. When we think of the God, we're really thinking of the all, the principle of the one, an unending, how do the Kabbalists put it? It's like a circle without a circumference or a point, an unending sea of fire. And out of a single spark, there's like you can say out of that fire is a flame, and then out of that flame a single spark comes us. Our essence is that single spark. But the flame that we descended from is that higher part of ourselves, that oversoul, Atman, if you want to call it that. That is our God within us, working within us. Obviously, if we were to see the absolute itself, we would be completely destroyed. So there's a kind of a great chain, so to speak. So we don't see the infinite absolute instantaneously in our first spiritual experience, or that would completely destroy us and negate the point of the work in the first place. We first perceive different levels. And one of the first things to connect to is that higher part. And that is connected to, is there something, even though it's the lowest part of God, it's the highest part of us. And so when we connect to it, it is something that gives off a great radiance. And its radiation, its light, permeates into us and changes us. So the way this practice begins is it's meditative, it's reflective, it's just straight up introversion. You're going into yourself. You're sealing the senses. So no impressions are coming in. And what happens when we're like this? Well, if no impressions come in, and obviously you're not reacting to any stimulus, i.e. memories that come up, desires, appetites that come up in your meditation practice, you're not reacting to that either. You're stable, you're serene. In this state, what do we reach? Silence? We're in a state of kind of blur. It's just darkness, black. It's an abyss. But what you have to understand is this abyss really is a womb. And with enough time, with enough waiting, light or something begins to appear. We begin to perceive something. You need stimulus. You need certain stimulus to develop senses. If there was no light, we would have no eyes. If there was no sound, we wouldn't need ears. So via closing off our senses, we force other faculties that have atrophied in us to begin to activate. And then once they activate, then there's this extension of consciousness. You're working on the consciousness itself. The eyes of the consciousness, the ears of the consciousness, the touch of the consciousness, intuition, memory, these things are extended. You're working purely on the consciousness itself. And this consciousness, eventually, it becomes like a bridge between you and that thing. And before you know it, there's no difference between you and that thing. There's no duality. You're in a state of non-duality. This is this path of radiance. This is the path of awakening and death. The other part is the part of birth. And it's interesting, it's like, what do you do? Because great demons are beings that have crystallized themselves. And because when you crystallize, you're separate from God. want, so to speak. So you can do what you want. And so there are people who crystallize and they, to a degree, awaken, but they awaken in evil, for evil. They're something separate. Whereas to be truly white, you cannot be born without having died first. And you cannot really die without having been awake first. So this path of radiance, of seeing great images of heaven, of heavenly realms, of being connected to that solar force that is above us, that's what we strive for first. You radiate first, and then you crystallize second. You can do it in the reverse. It's not like if you just do crystallization, you just automatically become a demon or something. It's just that we have ego inside us. We have desires inside us. And when you endow someone with power, power isn't dangerous. They say power corrupts, but it's not that it corrupts. When you add power to something, the power expands all of the attributes in a person, all of them, all of the good attributes and all of the bad. So if someone's charitable and you give them power, they become more charitable. But if also they're an angry bastard at home, like they're charitable and they go home and they kind of yell at their wife, if you give them more power, yeah, they'll be more charitable, but they're also going to be more angry, more, how dare you say this to me? That's going to expand in them more. So that's the danger. That's why you need to die to certain things. You need to become as pure as possible. It's good to do the alchemists, solve et coagula. You need to dissolve yourself, purify out all of the impurities, and then recoagulate everything. So it's like, the ore. You have a rough ore, and then you melt it down, get out the impurities, and then when you solidify it back together, it's a more pure metal, and you can sell it. It's more valuable then, more useful. That's what you're doing. Whereas if you just crystallize now with everything in you, like most people, we all have some good attributes, but a lot of people, and me included, have a lot of bad attributes. And so that's a part of the path, is stripping those things away. Perhaps you can do them both at the same time. Radiation and crystallization. Perhaps you can do one before the other. Perhaps you can crystallize and then radiate. If you live your life by principles and guided and whatnot, there may be many paths like that. But these are two things which are completely separate. But at the same time, they must be conjoined to have something that's truly great. The greatest masters have done both paths. They have not rejected either one of these things. They have both crystallized and they have radiated. So radiation, you're receiving something coming down. It's like the downward triangle. And then crystallization, it's you're building something up out of the soil of your earth. So there's the triangle going upwards. So then the six-sided star, the Solomon's seal or the conqueror's star, this symbol symbolizes this work. This is really a symbol of the great work which you're trying to attain. You're trying to combine both of these principles, and that's what really makes us the most, so to speak, godlike in that sense. The most godlike is reaching this state. Both these things crystallize, both solar and lunar at the same time. And that's very difficult because crystallization is more of you'd say mystery. But once you have the secret of the mystery, which is really tantra or sexual magic, that's not spilling any of the sexual energy. It must be transmuted inwards and upwards because that's the principle. As above, so below. You spill sexual energy outside, it creates. What does sexual energy do? What does the sex do? It creates. So if you therefore transmute it inwards and upwards, what happens? Something else is created, but internal. So when you have a male and a female together, someone can't create by themselves. So when you have a male and female come together, as you have in tantric traditions and as you see symbolically, Shiva and Shakti, or in a lot of Buddhist tankas, you see on the highest point, there's like this symbol of it's like a white female and a blue male, and they're in a union, always at the top of all of the Buddhist symbols. It's very interesting. But there's many different symbols that describe this union. Some alchemical symbols show this union, the red and the white, the red king and white queen, or switch the colors around maybe. This tantric practice involves the crystallization, but you can do that and still be an asshole. So there's something else that needs to take place. There's the work on the consciousness, and this is way more common, but in a sense it's way more harder. So this is the goal. There's two keys that open the doors to the mystery. One key is golden and one key is silver. One is more precious, but one is more harder to refine. So the precious key is the gold key, which is the tantric key, which is the one that's most veiled. But then there's the silver key, which requires much more skill to create, is the thing. And this is interesting because, you know, this is hard as well. You know, I said you can awaken, and you can awaken in evil for evil. When we follow the path of radiance, we're trying to go up. But there are people who can extend their consciousness, you know, through certain mental techniques. And then they reject that higher light. It's very odd. This is very odd. Because here's the thing. When you think about black magicians, they can crystallize. I mean, they negatively crystallize in a certain way that I won't describe. But they're also conscious. They're conscious in the astral plane. How are they able to do that? A black magician doesn't worship God. They worship themselves. They don't, you know, protect their sexual energy. They continuously spill it and then leech off of other people. That's what, you know, kind of succubuses and demons and vampires are. They, you know, they take the life force directly, sometimes through the blood. But, so they awaken in evil for evil. How are they awake? How have they extended their consciousness? It shows that to extend the consciousness is extended intrinsically via internal mechanics in and of itself. Concentration exercises, sitting, you know, Zen kind of exercise, meditations. That's why when you go to see all these yoga things and Buddhist things, what do? They continuously hammer compassion and, you know, exercises to, you know, spread love around the world and do this. All of those things are really purifying things. They want you to change slowly. They want to affect your attitude, the way you are, your character. There are things there to purify your character first, so that when you do awaken, you know, you choose to go up, you don't choose to go down, because that choice is always there. So we need to be strong enough to continuously, you know, to not reject what is higher. Because it's easier to go down a mountain than it is to go up. It's easier to throw yourself in an abyss than scale a tower. So that's what black magicians do. In a sense, they are weak. In a sense, another sense, they're misguided completely. There is a great secret in the abyss that no one knows. This is something interesting and it's hard to describe, but angels don't know what's in the abyss because a lot of faculties that allow you to understand something spiritually, like intuition or clairvoyance, they require you, in a sense, to commune with that thing. So, like, everything is joined via love, via bonds, invisible bonds, and those are usually, like, it's described as the bond of love. We feel ourselves connected to everything in the universe via these bonds of love. But here's the thing that's interesting. Can you love a demon? Can you love evil? If you're walking a certain path, you can't do that. And if you can't do that, you can't commune with evil and you can't really know it. You can only know it from an outside observer perspective. So black magicians learn a secret that not even the angels or the gods know. That's why, in some cases, they say, that's why people who follow exclusively the path of radiance, in a sense, there's more danger for them because they never learn this mystery. People who follow the path of crystallization, it's said that they, you know, to truly crystallize, you need that fire I mentioned. And to get that fire, you need to steal it from Lucifer. You actually need to go down. You need to walk amongst, you carry the staff in the right hand, but you balance with the left foot. So you're able to walk in the abyss without being affected by the black magicians or by the demons. This is the path of the razor's edge. Because if you fall to the left, you become a demon. But if you fall to the right, you become a god. And that's a fall. So you don't want to become a god, and you don't want to become a demon. You want to become neither. You want to go beyond both. This requires you to awaken. This requires you to radiate. This requires you to crystallize, to create. You need to do both, and you need to descend to go up. This is what Dante does in Dante's Inferno. He goes down into the depths. He sees firsthand everything there. And then what does he do? He climbs up Lucifer's back into purgatory, which then purifies him. And then through the heavenly paradise at the top of purgatory, he then ascends into the spheres. But he also isn't blocked. A lot of angels, they cannot go out of their sphere just because of their nature. But he can pierce all of the spheres, even beyond Saturn, even into the Empyrean, and even into the center to see the Mother of God, and even beyond that to see God himself. It's like, you want to get back to the one, to the very center of everything. That's something truly tremendous. And it's to really kind of grasp, you have to understand these two sides of the work, which end up as one. But this is something that's not really talked about that much, so I'll explain it here. I'm not sure what I'm going to call this little talk, but we'll see. Enjoy.